Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's the Transform Your Birth Catch-Up. And today we're going to look at a very important topic. It's about helping women with decision-making and birth mapping. You know, it's really interesting. Tomorrow I'm actually going to North Canberra Birth Centre, and they're wanting me to talk about this very same topic. So I've been doing a bit of thinking about it and just keen to sort of support you when it comes to decision making and also using your birth mapping as a communication tool. You know, one of the challenges that you have is the noise around you. And when you get given so much advice from both health professionals, experts, books, Google, influencers, all the different noise around you, it can prevent you from actually really tuning into yourself. My beautiful midwife with my first birth, she used to say this beautiful quote. She said, the women know. They don't know that they know, but when you ask them, they know. And she would always divert a lot of the different phases and stages for the pregnant woman. She'd say, well, what do you think? And what's your sense of this? And even in labour, she'd divert it back to the mother. And the mother typically could answer the question. So I think it's important to recognise that there's a deep intelligence within you and within your system that is worth tapping into. And it's very hard in this day and age because we're in the era of the expert. So I just wanted to highlight that. And it reminds me of the story of one of my mothers. She's a hilarious woman. I remember her telling me about her interactions with her birth centre midwife, and she said, she's really driving me up the wall. She keeps asking me to make choices, and I say to her, well, what do you think? And she says, no, this is your decision. And it drives me nuts because I just want to know what she thinks. I thought that was a cracker because we do tend to look to experts to guide us, and she was having trouble trusting herself to make decisions around her pregnancy and also the birth. Now, when it comes to being able to do this, preparation is so important. And all of you have done the preparation with me to really get clear that you do have options, and you've now got the questions to identify the difference between a medical necessity and a choice. And one of the first things that I think people realise when they do my course is that often it's your first experience of being in a hospital. And when you start to interact with different health professionals, you start to realise that different ones have different opinions and come from a different place, a different model of care, a different belief system underpinning that, different experiences, different training, and all of that will go into the mix of your health professionals' minds that then cause them to suggest certain things about either your pregnancy or the birth. What you soon realise is that everybody's got a different opinion, which helps you to understand that there is no one way. So it's important when we're dealing with making decisions that we actually start to recognise that we can take the information that our caregivers give us, which might be a risk analysis. They might talk about the evidence. There's a higher rate of X, and all of that is one piece of the puzzle when it comes to information. You want to take that along with the pregnancy, and from that place you make the decision, as well as tuning into yourself and tuning into your own sort of sense of what it is that you think you need to do. So there's a very, very important role that you play in this. I'll tell you a quick story. I had this gorgeous woman, Ellie, and she had her first birth had been an induction, and it had gotten very difficult and tricky, and it just ended up being a cascade of things that she needed. And she was having her second baby, and she really wanted to avoid an induction. And of course, she goes over 40 weeks, and then the pressure was on. And by about 41 plus 2 or 3, she rang me and she said, I just don't know what to do. And of course, nobody wants to take risks with their baby. And this woman didn't want to take risks with her baby, but she also understood the very reality of what inductions can mean in terms of changing the trajectory of how we welcome that baby and the whole birth experience. And she rang me. And now, of course, I don't ever give medical advice. I'm not qualified to, and I'm very, very clear around my boundaries with that. But one of the things that became obvious to me is she just had noise everywhere. There was just people giving opinions, and her partner was, not sure, and she just, didn't know where to go. So she was in quite a state. And in that moment, I just got her to breathe and got her to close her eyes. And I took her back to her calm breathing, which is slow through the nose, gentle, with a good posture, with an open diaphragm. And then I got her to imagine that there's two paths in front of you. And one is the induction path and one is the wait path. And the wait path is only relevant for today. And I want you to just step onto the induction path and notice what happens in your body. And she was imagining herself doing this. And I got her to notice what happens in her body, to notice what her thoughts are. Is there a contraction? Is there a resistance? And to explore that. And then I got her to hop off that path and then walk on the waiting path. And notice how your body feels. What's your sense of your baby? Does your baby feel okay? What messages is your baby giving you? And then I got her to hop off. And then when we had a chat about it afterwards, she said, oh my God, I couldn't believe how clear the decision was. And I said, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Now, I've done that exercise with many women, and I haven't had one yet who hasn't had a very clear sense of what to do. So I love that story because I think it highlights that we have so much more in us than what we realise. But when you're surrounded by noise and health professionals and all of those things, then it just makes it really, really difficult. So when it comes to communicating with your caregivers about any decision making that you have, I'm just going to remind you now of the questions that you ask. Kate, this will be a good review for you. And these are the questions that I gave your partners. What are the risks? What are the benefits? Are there any alternatives? What else might I need if we do this? What would happen if I waited? What would happen if I didn't do the procedure? Very, very important questions. And then, of course, the other questions that I gave you, which is very, very helpful when it comes to making decisions, were the ones to ask your caregivers before the day of labour or birth. And they're the sort of questions, I'll just go through a few of them now. How will you monitor my baby? Under what conditions would you want me to be continuously monitored? And if you wanted me to be continuously monitored, can I have breaks for monitoring to move around, to respond, to hop in the shower, these sorts of things? And to negotiate, if you do need continuous monitoring, to negotiate the ability to move, which means you can ask for the Bluetooth monitor or, if appropriate, the scalp monitor. If my waters break at the beginning of labour, what needs to happen? Under what conditions would you want to do a vaginal examination? It's a really great question because in some places of care, they come in and they want to do them every 1 or 2 hours, which makes your vagina feel like central station, and I suspect would actually slow down your labour. Okay, because when you take a woman out of her zone and you perform something as intimate as a vaginal examination, unless there's a good reason, it can very much get in the way of labour. And I have heard stories where women's cervixes have gone and closed up again. Okay, so we don't want to do too many of those unless there's a good reason. Under what circumstances would you want me on my back? Under what circumstances would you want to do an episiotomy? Is it possible for my partner to catch the baby? When wouldn't they be able to catch the baby? Under what conditions would I be able to have a physiological third stage, which is birthing your placenta without any need for fuss, without the injection? When would you want to press down on my stomach? Now, that's sometimes a procedure they do if they're worried about bleeding, okay, to try and get that uterus to shrink a little bit quicker. Under what circumstances would I not be able to have delayed cord clamping? And then questions like this, in the case of caesarean, who will be in the room? Who can come in? In the case of a cesarean with a general where you've been knocked out, who will be in the room? Who can come in? What happens to my partner? Very, very important questions. And then there's another really important part of this process when it comes to decision making and communicating on the day, and that's your birth preferences sheet or your birth map. Now, your birth preferences sheet is a one-page document. I give most of you an email around, I'll give all of you an email around that with a bit of a template and some ideas around the importance of it, so you can have a look through it, have a look at some of the things that you want to include. And there's been a few other things that have come to my attention recently that are potentially worth exploring and putting on your birth map. Things like separation from the baby. In the case of separation of my baby, it is important to me that I'm informed of my baby's progress. Letting them know that's important to you, because that's one of the hardest things if you're separated, is no communication. In the case of cesarean with a general, I would like your support. I would like your support for my partner to put the baby to my skin, even if I'm not awake. In the case of separation, baby is to be given express breast milk, donated breast milk, or only then formula. What are your thoughts around that? Just a few little things that have popped up for me recently, and I've just put them on here to just get you to think about and potentially put on your birth preferences sheet to have a look at that. Okay, so communicating with your carers is very important. Now, there's been a couple of questions come in for this session, and I'll just go through them now. Ali's asked, she's waiting in the waiting. So she's being tested now because she's actually due. She was due yesterday. And she's worried about going over her due date. Now, due date's a very interesting thing. I like to always tell people that 40 weeks means nothing. It is a line in the sand your carers draw, but it really doesn't mean anything. 95% of babies are born between 37 and 42 weeks. I even knew a woman who had 4 babies, all born at 44 weeks. She resisted induction. She just felt in her family it was very common for them to take a long time to grow their babies. And they were quite a big family, so maybe that's why. I don't know, huge humans. So even there's a 5% that are even born outside of this window and could be considered full term, because how long it takes to grow a baby is very different. So 37 to 42 weeks is the zone. So what that means is pre-37 weeks you're early, post 42 weeks you're late. Now, typically they're inducing at the moment at 41 plus 4, I think it is. But even then, they often give you a window of bookings. So, you know, they might ring you up and say, okay, we're booking you in for your induction. It'll be in the next 4 days. So just be ready to take the call in the morning. And if we call you in, come in. And that gives you an idea of just, you know, how important are these inductions if you're getting an induction window as opposed to an induction date. I mean, if they're really concerned about the baby, they'll pull you in straight away and say, we need to do X or whatever. So that's an important thing to recognise. So if you do decide, though, to push against medical opinion, you can ask for things like, can I come in for some extra monitoring? And I would always encourage you to keep an eye on baby's movements. If ever you're worried about baby's movements, then, you know, don't hesitate, just go in for some extra monitoring. And who cares if they think you're just a neurotic mother? Be neurotic, own it. It's you wanting to protect this baby. But certainly, yeah, it's okay, and people do push the barrow to the very limit of 42 weeks. Now, after that, you can still keep pushing. Obviously, that's your choice. And yeah, good luck to you if you do. There will be a lot of pressure, though, to induce. So that's that one. And then Beth asked the question, advice on how to manage healthcare professionals. They've been giving a lot of negative information and statistics. And this is such a common question that I hear from people. One of the challenges your health care providers have to offer is what's called informed consent. So they need to inform you of all the potential problems. And that's part of their medical duty of care. So we have to accept that that's them doing their job. And even though that might not be good for our subconscious mind or our psychological well-being, it is part of the nature of the beast. Anytime you go in for any surgery or anything within a hospital system, that's part of what their duty of care is. Now, what you do with that information, though, is your choice. That's not something that you need to necessarily hang on to. You can let it go through to the keeper. You know, we don't need to know all the things that they know. We just need to know that they know those things. And so knowing and understanding the risks and having them mitigate those risks, manage those risks is very reassuring. We're lucky to have the medical system because it's a wonderful safety net. In terms of what that information means to us, that's our choice. Now, that doesn't mean your subconscious doesn't hang on to some of that stuff. And I would encourage you, for any of the things that the healthcare providers have said to you that's made you scared, do what you did in the class. Write down the fear. Is it a fear that you need more information for? And then you can potentially let it go. Is it a fear that you just have to put in your pocket and continue to choose love over fear and just recognize that that's the nature of the game? And is it a fear that you can reframe? And if you need help to do that, ring me, email, don't email me, I hate emails, or come to the catch-ups and I'll help talk you through what might be a game plan should that particular event come to pass and how you would manage that. Once your mind has a game plan on how to deal with it, then it gets a lot easier and you can find more peace in the fact that that's something that you're dealing with. Okay, it's the how that's often missed. And that's certainly when I go into hospitals and I talk with the midwives, particularly the childbirth educators, I keep telling them you talk too much about the what can happen and not enough about the how to manage it. And it is difficult for them to know how to manage it because they don't teach the mind-body connection. They don't teach the way that you've experienced it. So, you know, I'm here, I'm your cheerleader on the side, and I'll do whatever I can to help allay those fears. And then the lovely Kate asked a great question around Kate's having her second baby. She had a postpartum hemorrhage with her first baby, and it's impinging upon the risks and the way that they're wanting to manage her second baby. Now, it's an interesting one, Kate. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is to listen to what the hospital caregivers might suggest around certain things, and how they intend to manage, you know, if there is another postpartum hemorrhage, because obviously that's something we don't want for anybody. And then if you want to explore the choice of an independent midwife, ask her how she would manage postpartum hemorrhage, because independent midwives absolutely have to be decked out to have the syntocinon in order to be able to manage postpartum hemorrhage at home. It's part of their kit. So getting a different opinion from somebody who's experienced, and typically home birth midwives are very experienced, to just see what their thoughts are around how to manage something like that is going to be very important. It's going to be very important for you to know that wherever you are is safe and that there's a game plan to manage it. And then I would encourage you in your preparation for this baby, particularly when you do your birth rehearsals, to really imagine yourself, you know, flowing into your labour, really getting into the zone. And then when it comes time to birthing, you know, your placenta, to imagining that uterus retracting and the placenta easily coming away and those blood vessels closing up very, very quickly. Now, there was a lot going on in your first birth, which would have predisposed you to a postpartum hemorrhage. That may not be going on with baby number 2. So just because you had it the first time doesn't mean you will have it again. And the real important information you need to get is how they would manage it And I know that your goal, and I know you quite well, is to have a birth that has as little interference as possible, for you to be in your zone, for you to feel safe and loved, and yeah, just make sure you can create that environment. But really happy to have a chat to you about that as well, on one-to-one, so we might make that happen. Okay, so that's the presentation for tonight. I hope that was really helpful. And yeah, know that we're here if you need. So have a good night. Bye, everyone.